Buongiorno. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 9th International Conference of the Ministers of Justice, A World Without the Death Penalty. On behalf of the Community of Sant'Egidio, which I am representing today, I would like to thank the Chamber of Deputies and the Presidency of the Social Affairs Commission of the Chamber of Deputies and President Marazziti for having granted us the use of this wonderful and prestigious hall at the very heart of Italian politics. And I also wish to thank all of the conference's partners, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, the European Commission, the International Organization for Francophony. On behalf of the Community of Sant'Egidio, I would like to welcome all of our distinguished guests, the ministers, the delegations, the ambassadors of all of the countries represented here. And I believe an applause is due to all of our guests who have joined us from abroad. We have European countries, African countries, Asian countries, American countries, and we are very happy with this very vast presence. And as a way of introducing our activities, I also wish to welcome Cardinal Reinhard Marx very warmly. He is sitting on my left. He is the Archbishop of Munich and Friesinga. He is the president of the German Bishops' Conference, which decided to sponsor this conference of ours, and they contributed to the contents of it as well. Thank you very much, Your Eminence, for being with us. Our other distinguished guests who are here next to me, Professor Peter Huber, who is a judge of the German Constitutional Court, who is fluent in Italian. As you can see, he is not wearing a headset. Jean-Louis Ville, who represents the European Union or the European Commission, and Mario Marazziti, who is the chairman of the Social Affairs Commission. And here in this hall, I wish to acknowledge Italy for the importance that our country has always given to this key battle for human rights. The battle with which our institutions have supported the United Nations resolutions to promote a moratorium of the death penalty. In the second part of this symposium, we will be joined by and Italy, through its patient and steadfast work, has certainly contributed in extending the number of abolitionist countries. This is the 9th year in dialogue, a sincere and transparent dialogue between different points of view, among which, though, the understanding concerning promoting justice, having different positions as far as the death penalty is concerned. different model as far as justice is concerned, one not so much based on deterrence, but one based on rehabilitation, rather. This effort of ours is supported by a number of personalities from the political world, from the government, and also by philosophers, legal experts, religious personalities, direct witnesses who testify to the inadequacy of an administration which is supported by things other than promoting life and reparation, based on intimidation, rather. And I want to thank His Holiness Pope Francis for his message yesterday during the Sunday Angelus. And after my introduction, we will have the opportunity of listening to his message, which is so important. We have reached a number of goals. Many countries have, the two most recent countries, which have eliminated any reference to the death penalty in their respective countries. And as a matter of fact, over the past 30 years, and especially from the beginning of the new century, abolishing the death penalty in the world has progressed a great deal. Ever since the 1990s, over 50 countries have abolished the death penalty for any kind of crime. In a moment in time in which conflict, terrorism, widespread violence, drug trafficking, namely all of the things which Pope Francis has described as the disseminated Third World War, or the piecemeal World War, the abolishing of the death penalty is good news, leading us to hope for a better future for the world. Over the years, the number of countries which have taken part in the debate has grown significantly. And this, too, is very important. I wish to thank all of the volunteers, all of the members of the Community of Sant'Egidio, who have worked so hard over the years so as to make sure that this topic be discussed in so many countries, leading to positive solutions. Today we are joined by representatives from some 30 countries worldwide, different countries as far as their governments and states are concerned, as far as their legal systems are concerned, and yet all of these countries are in search of a humane response, one that can answer to their citizens' request for safety, especially in this day and age, with the propaganda injected into our societies by terrorism. And yet fear, as we have always said, doesn't bring about good tips, good suggestions. And therefore we are here to try to discuss how we can overcome fear. Therefore, a debate, a dialogue based on mutual respect together can be a way of consolidating the reasons behind peace, the reasons behind the value of human life. And they can help us to renew our commitment to safeguard life, in full awareness that a world without the death penalty isn't worse off, it isn't weaker, it is simply a better world. The Community of Sant'Egidio has been committed on this level for so many years now. And as of this year, we have launched an appeal to the governors of the United States in the Year of Mercy for a moratorium of the death penalty. And as the Pope himself said in Mexico, God's mercy surprises us. And I wish to quote the Pope. Far from annihilating, as we often wish to do, mercy is close to any situation, to transform it from within. We wish to transform life through the solutions that we will be finding. We wish to transform the lives of those who have made mistakes, those who have committed crimes. We wish to transform their lives from within, because as we always say, there can be no justice without life. This is our battle, and thank you all very much for being here today.
Ora appunto come accennato.
And as I was saying, we can now watch the video. We can now watch Pope Francis's Angelus.
Cari fratelli,
Dear brothers and sisters,
possa dare un rinnovato impulso all'impegno per l'abolizione della pena capitale. Un segno di speranza è costituito dallo sviluppo nell'opinione pubblica di una sempre più diffusa contrarietà alla pena di morte, anche solo come strumento di legittima difesa sociale. In effetti, le società moderne hanno la possibilità di reprimere efficacemente il crimine senza togliere definitivamente a colui che ha commesso la possibilità di redimersi. Il problema va inquadrato nell'ottica di una giustizia penale che sia sempre più conforme alla dignità dell'uomo e al disegno dell'uomo, di Dio sull'uomo e la società, e anche a una giustizia penale aperta alla speranza del reinserirsi nella società. Il comandamento non uccidere ha valore assoluto, riguarda sia l'innocente che il colpevole. Il Giubileo straordinario della misericordia è un'occasione propizia per promuovere nel mondo forme sempre più mature di rispetto della vita e della dignità di ogni persona. Anche il criminale mantiene l'inviolabile diritto alla vita, dono di Dio. Faccio appello alla coscienza dei governanti affinché si giunga ad un consenso internazionale per l'abolizione della pena di morte e propongo a quanti tra loro sono cattolici di compiere un gesto coraggioso ed esemplare, che nessuna condanna venga eseguita in questo anno santo della misericordia. Tutti i cristiani e gli uomini di buona volontà sono chiamati oggi ad operare non solo per l'abolizione della pena di morte, ma anche al fine di migliorare le condizioni carcerarie nel rispetto della dignità umana delle persone private della libertà.
we truly wish to thank the Pope for his support to this conference of ours and for his plea to us all through the plea to our governors. And now like to give the floor to the Cardinal, who is the president of the German Bishops' Conference, besides being the Archbishop of Munich in Bavaria. As you know, the Cardinal is a member of the Council of Cardinals, which has been summoned by Pope Francis to cooperate for the Universal Church, and therefore we are honored by his presence. Your Eminence, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much that you invited me for this Congress, for this meeting. When we discussed it several months ago in our small group, and the Community of Sant'Egidio made the proposal, made the proposition to organize in the Year of Mercy this meeting, I was very happy to hear about it. And so I think it is a good step in this Year of Mercy to bring this idea of abolishment of the penalty of death, a death penalty, to a greater public, also in the church and outside of the church, in the parliaments, in the countries. The title of our conference, A World Without Death Penalty, No Justice Without Life, clearly expresses our determination and the intent of this meeting, and the Holy Father underlined it very clearly. We have heard it. As a bishop of the Catholic Church, I'm responsible also for the conference of the bishops in Germany and also of the commission of the European Bishops' Conferences of the European Union. And we discuss a lot about these political issues. I can only welcome the initiative and the tenacity with which the Community of Sant'Egidio has undertaken this battle of civilization. It's one step in a greater battle for life, for integral view of life. Then the approach of Sant'Egidio is holistic, deeply Catholic or universal. To fight for the abolition of death penalty, collecting all the useful actors, enhancing the single or partial steps of each country, avoiding any ideological preconceptions, intervening on individual cases of those sentenced to death, and at the same time providing legal instruments to countries that request it. Sant'Egidio has also invested the capital acquired through years of dialogue with other religions and religious worlds, together with the credit acquired in the defense of peace, to put it at the service of the defense of life and of a rehabilitated justice that excludes the use of the death penalty. It has progressively broadened the consent to the universal moratorium on capital punishment, humanizing prisons, looking for synergies and networks in the service of the progress of civilization. I am deeply convinced that really there is no justice without life. The Church had to go a way forward. What Pope Francis said was not always the meaning of the Church. We have to admit it. So it was a way, and I think a central role, key role, was the role of John Paul II. When you look on the editions of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, you can see the development to look on the doctrine of the Church away from thinking in categories of retributive justice and punishment, penitence, to a way of conversion, changing life, giving chances to everybody, and accepting the dignity of life, human dignity for all people, also for the prisoners. That's a changing, I think, in the society, but also in the Church. And I think that was very important. John Paul II could bring together all these points, protecting life from the first moment to the last moment of life, to the natural death, the death penalty, the protection of life when you look on social justice, when you look on peace, the struggle for peace. He was very clear in denying the war and all violence. So we have also in the Church, and I'm very happy about it, a development. And it's good. And John Paul II was it to bring it together, the theme, the issue of human dignity, to the concept of civilization, of love and life, of humanizing the society, and that the Church can bring forward, also in this issue of death penalty, a society which is not only more just, but human, more human. I think now in the Great Jubilee of Mercy, we have the chance to bring this forward with new energy. And Pope Francis can look on the doctrine on the teaching of John Paul II and Benedict XVI, who followed this line in the editions. He was responsible for it in the editions of the Catechism, to bring step by step this idea of absolute abolishing the death penalty to the conscience of the Church, to the conscience of every Christian, and also to fight for it in the political scene. I think these steps of Catholic moral teaching in this point are very important, and we underline this today. This conference is a timely and unique opportunity to reduce the freedom to kill and to find the reasons of humanity. We are here at the 9th edition of the conference, so the work is not yet done. We're going forward. And through the years we have gained new achievements, while new effective and intelligent strategies have been developed to achieve courageous decisions, even on the part of some states whose ministers now sit among us. These advances correspond to the recommendations that the same Benedict expressed in 2011. I quote, "I greet the distinguished delegations from various countries taking part in the meeting promoted by the Community of Sant'Egidio on the theme No Justice Without Life. I express my hope that your deliberations will encourage the political and legislative initiatives being promoted in a growing number of countries to eliminate the death penalty and to continue the substantive progress made in conforming penal law to both human dignity of prisoners and the effective maintenance of public order." Quote end. Huge expectations rise from the four corners of the earth today in the Jubilee year that Pope Francis has dedicated to mercy. Mercy, an open door to life and forgiveness for all. Mercy, rebellion of God to evil, death, violence. In this time so marked by conflict, terrorism, we heard it, fear, mercy in this great meaning is the true light of hope. I quote, "Mercy cannot remain indifferent to the suffering of the oppressed, to the cry of those who are subjected to violence, reduced to slavery, condemned to death." So Pope Francis on Wednesday, the 27th of January of this year. For us Christians, mercy has the face of a man condemned to death and who on the cross is able to forgive those who crucified him. A man who eradicated every evil instinct and all death projects, making universal the commandment not to kill. Mercy defends society from the thirst of revenge and preserves humanity. And also today you hear politicians all over the world, they're speaking about revenge. That's not the solution of any social or political problem. It provokes to find intelligent rehabilitation programs for those who commit serious crimes. It injects doses of confidence and wisdom in people. The fear of death inflicted by the state is never a deterrent for those who have already experienced of death, inflicting it, thus becoming its slaves in terrorist ideologies or criminal plans. We think about mafias or drug trafficking. They have no fear of the death penalty. That's not the instrument to bring peace in society and to bring reconciliation in society. It is not a deterrent in those who cause death by killing themselves, profaning the name of God they would like at the service in totalitarian projects and terror. Pope Francis has urged the Catholic Church throughout the world to become the protagonist of mercy. His recent pronouncements on the subject of capital punishments, yesterday the last one, are insistent and clear and affect people's consciences. Also in the US Congress, he underlined this when he said, "The Golden Rule also reminds us of our responsibility to protect and defend human life at every stages of its development. This conviction has led me from the beginning of my ministry to advocate at different levels for the global abolition of the death penalty." Conferences follow the Pope now, and I think this meeting here and the Community of Sant'Egidio is very helpful to bring also bishops and bishops' conferences in this line to fight for the abolishment of the death penalty, because this is a step for humanizing society. It changes also the society. Not only is a chance for the prisoner, for life, for changing his life, it's also changing the society, it's also changing those who abolish this way of making, or they think to make justice, but that is not the justice which is connected with mercy. Many bishops' conferences, I will not quote them all, also the African bishop, the Synod of Africa has underlined this very clearly. I quote many Africans I hear, the African bishops, "The dignity of the person requires that his or her fundamental right be respected even when one does not respect the rights of others. The death penalty frustrates such an aim. At times, the death penalty is used to eliminate political opponents. Moreover, poor people who cannot defend themselves are more easily subjected to this final unappealable punishment." And the African Synod ends and says, "This Synod calls for the total and universal abolition of the death penalty." And I think I can this also say for the German Bishops' Conference and for the European Bishops' Conferences. For the rule of law, Pope Francis says the death penalty represents a failure, as it obliged the state to kill in the name of justice. That is gone. That is not the civilization of love and life and the civilization of the future, that the state will guard or will maintain the right to kill. That is passato, and we have to fight for it. To reach in an encounter with God's merciful and healing justice, we have to fight for this vision of a new society, of a better society, and the Church must be part of this development, and the Pope underlines it's a step of coming forward in the civilization of love and life. And it's changed, I said it, the two. The prisoners, they have the chance to life, to begin a new life, to be reintegrated in the society, and the society who makes a step forward. Like Shakespeare said, I will end with Shakespeare, who said in the famous quotation in The Merchant of Venice, when Portia says, "The quality of mercy is not strained, It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blessed him that gives, and him that takes. Thank you.
Grazie, Eminenza.
Thank you, Your Eminence. We've heard the words reinforcing the support of the Catholic Church, the words of the Pope, the words of Cardinal Marx, and also the very interesting development you have described when it comes to the path pursued by the Church in this regard to come to not only just solutions but humane solutions. And I think this is extremely important for us to point out. These are very strong words that bear witness to the commitment of Christians, to the commitment of the Church in the world, to continue to work for a more humane society. Also, through the abolition of the death penalty. I was really impressed by what the Pope said in his message. He talked about modernity. He said that modern societies have the option of repressing crime efficiently and effectively without stripping the person who committed a crime to be redeemed. So this is the justice of tomorrow. Thank you, Your Eminence. I also would like to thank the many students that are here today. I know they come from some high schools here in Rome, and I think it's extremely important for them to be here today because we want to sensitize the public opinion to this full life. So thank you for being here with us today. I also would like to thank the many guests that are here. I will now hand it over to Jean-Louis Ville, who's an official of the European Commission. For some years has been the head of the Unit Gender and Human Rights of the Interim Directorate for Human Development and Migration. The person in charge, as you know, is Federica Mogherini. His brief deals with human development and migration, so it's a big burden. But for this reason, we met and we agreed on many things, so I would like to thank him for being here. He's French, he speaks Italian very well, but he's going to speak English. Thank you.
Grazie tante, Eminenza, Eccellenza.
Eminences, Excellencies, distinguished authorities, and guests. I'm very pleased to be your guest here today and to join forces with you, making myself heard for those who are fighting for the abolition of the death penalty. Illustri ospiti.
The European Union of international efforts to abolish death penalty worldwide. All European member states are strongly opposed to the death penalty in all circumstances. The abolition of death penalty is a requirement for countries seeking EU membership. The fight against death penalty is enshrined in Protocol 6 and 13 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which prohibit recourse to death penalty under any circumstances, both in peacetime and in wartime. It is also a strong feature of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, which was proclaimed at the European Council Summit in December 2000 in Nice. That is why torture and other cruel inhuman treatment and punishment and the fight against death penalty are at the heart of the EU human rights policy. Since their first adoption in 1998, the EU guidelines on death penalty have provided a solid and efficient basis for the EU abolitionist objectives. Subsequent updates and revision of 2001 and 2008, and notably 2013, we are updating quite oftenly, as you can see, had succeeded in consolidating the EU language on the abolition of the capital punishment and defining individual objectives that are, first, full abolition where possible. Second, establishment of moratorium on execution, and third, respect of international minimum standards. We therefore work tirelessly using all our available tools of diplomacy and cooperation assistance towards achieving the goal of worldwide abolition. The fight against death penalty is also, as you know, certainly here in Italy, a personal pride of China, Vietnam, Taiwan, and the USA. Also issued and demonstrations carried out in many other countries on death penalty, stressing the inadmissibility of the use of constitutes most serious ones, such as drug offences. Through 2015, the EU continued to reaffirm its opposition to death penalty, and namely, it adopted a new action plan on human rights and democracy for the next 4 years, maintaining the death penalty was together with torture at the very heart of its priorities, calling for their comprehensive inclusion in all EU support actions toward partner countries and civil society organizations. To mark the European Day Against the Death Penalty and the World Day Against Death Penalty on 10th of October, the EU has issued a joint statement with the Council of Europe, reaffirming their opposition to the use of capital punishment in all circumstances, and to the abolition, and their commitment to the abolition of the death penalty worldwide. But the EU has also continued to raise its opposition to death penalty in all relevant multilateral fora, in particular at the UN, at the USCE, and the Council of Europe, building the success of the adoption of the United Nations General Assembly Resolution number 69 on the moratorium of execution, with an unprecedented numbers of votes in favor. Last but not least, through its development cooperation, the EU is a lead donor in the field and provides substantial financial assistance both to the judiciary on national level and to NGO projects under the European European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights. Since 2016, this instrument has allocated almost 20 million euro to project fighting against death penalty around the world. Projects by the EC were selected through global calls for proposals. And actually, we are in the proceeding of having a new selection procedure, which should end up by, let's say, before summer, where we intend to allocate 6.8 million euro to projects for civil society organizations. I am fully convinced of the effectiveness of our work and of the importance of our support to your work in the fight against torture and death penalty. We had recently a successful example of the leverage and the impact of our support. Indeed, the governor of Pennsylvania acknowledged the decisive role of the American Bar Association report, which was funded by the ADHR, in the adoption of the moratorium on death penalty that was declared in his state in 2015. I'm indeed particularly pleased to note that the worldwide trend towards abolition is positive, as in December 2015, 141 countries, so more than 2/3 of the countries in the world, were abolitionists in law or in practice. I welcome namely the recent abolition of the death penalty in Madagascar, in Fiji, in Suriname, and in the US state of Nebraska. Nevertheless, I'm also aware that there's a lot of work that remains, and it remains to be done, and that other parts of the world are witnessing very worrying trends such as the MENA region. You can count on the EU willingness to accompany you on the long journey of this abolition. Vorrei porgere I miei più sentiti ringraziamenti agli organizzatori.
I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to be here and to talk about one of the fundamental questions for your attention.
Grazie molte, Jean-Louis Ville.
Thank you very much, Jean-Louis Ville. We know that the civil society, our community, many men and women of goodwill know that they can count on the European Union, as you were saying at the end of your presentation, fully explained. It is at the heart of the policies of human rights since 1998. It's been like this in the guidelines that you have so beautifully described. So thank you very much. Let's switch continents. Let's go to Africa. We're going to hand it over to Michael Masuta, who's the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services of South Africa. He's been minister since 2014. South Africa, as you know, is a country that has abolished by law, abolished the death penalty by law. And it is a country that has shown a great development because it is one of the countries where many executions have taken place between 1980 and 1999. More than 1,200 people have been killed. But after the end of apartheid, a moratorium was introduced, and then the death penalty was abolished. Now South Africa is one of the countries that is supporting this battle very closely and is showing how things can change. And things can change for the better because we all know the strength, the political, the moral strength that this country has in Africa. So let's hear what the Minister of Justice is going to tell us. I would like to thank also the Ambassador of South Africa, Mrs. Dumbo, who has cooperated with our community for many events. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished ministers from different parts of the world, distinguished guests, and in particular allow me to acknowledge fellow leaders from our mother continent, Africa, who recently, when we met in Addis Ababa, committed ourselves to a number of objectives which seek to advance the living conditions of the people of Africa through economic development and the promotion of human rights in our continent. Let me also take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this event, in particular the Society or Community of Sant'Egidio, who have, over the years, provided leadership and extended the humanity not only to the people of Italy, but people of the world by establishing chapters of the world in a quest to bring about better life and a sense of justice to the people of the world, especially those most in need. Let me also take this opportunity to thank His Holiness Pope Francis for providing leadership. As we saw earlier on, his words of encouragement and offering direction to the world to steer ourselves out of erstwhile practices that negate fundamental human rights and to work towards promoting a sense of common humanity, of mercy, and of forgiveness. Members of the Community of Sant'Egidio, ladies and gentlemen, South Africa expresses its gratitude for having been invited by the Community of Sant'Egidio to this international meeting of leaders dedicated to the abolition of capital punishment in the world. This initiative fits into the broad work of a universal moratorium on the death penalty, short of its complete abolition, for which this community has been working for many years across the globe. I'll be failing in representing my country if I do not share a remarkable story of one of our biggest correctional centers, Mpuru II, who relentlessly doing so was met by death sentence through hanging. Kgoshi Mampuru II refused to recognize the Zuid-Afrikaanse Republic and to pay taxes to it. And so, 131 years ago, he was hanged to death at the old Pretoria Central Prison on 22nd November 1883. The Transvaal Advertiser of 24th November 1883 recorded that, and I quote, "The Executive Council of this state, having decided that the sentence of death pronounced upon the Kefa chief, Mampuru, at the last criminal sessions of the High Court for murder and rebellion should be carried out. The execution took place on Thursday morning of 22nd November. Generally, the dread sentence of the law is carried out within the precincts of the goal, but for some reason or other, it was to vary the practice in the case of Mampuru, and the gallows was erected on the western side of the goal within the enclosure. Some 260 white persons took advantage of the opportunity of witnessing a public execution furnished to them by the executive. These men of education and standing in society turned out early in the morning to behold a scene that under any circumstances is most repulsive and horrible," end quote. The government enforced the attendance of the Kefa prisoners who had been more or less compatriots of Mampuru, and they were compelled to witness the death agonies of the chief. It may be mentioned that the condemned prisoner with a shirt, and he was hanged in all his nakedness, end quote. The brutal execution of Kgoshi Mampuru was reported as far as the United States. The New York Times of 2 days later, for example, recorded that, and I quote, "Mampuru was led naked to the jail yard in the presence of 200 whites. The first rope used broke when the trap was sprung, and Mampuru fell into a pit below. He was dragged out, however, and another attempt to hang him was successful," end quote. Indeed, as Pope Francis eloquently observed in his speech, and I quote, "If we want security, let us give security. If we want life, let us give life. If we want opportunities, then let us provide opportunities," end quote. Likewise, imbued with the spirit of truth and for the South African interim constitution, born out of a negotiated political settlement shortly before the democratization of our country, one of its pillars, a chapter on fundamental rights, which served as a blueprint against which laws and societal values were to be measured. It envisaged a society based on values of reconciliation, Ubuntu, or humanity, and not vengeance and retaliation. This was followed subsequently by the final settlement codified in the final constitution adopted in 1996, which contains the framework for democratic majority rule, a constitutional state, and a human rights culture, providing a platform from which to build a truly united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous society. Excellencies, our Constitution includes a chapter on fundamental rights, commonly known as the Bill of Rights, which is entrenched therein. The consequence of entrenching this right, entrenching the right to life, was the abolition of the death penalty, amongst others, which is central and is one of the notable features of our Bill of Rights. In the past, penalty was used largely against the majority black people of our country who in many instances had no legal representation. It was mainly used as a tool for political repression and to punish political dissent. And alarming, most of those executed were later found to have been innocent after all. In a precedent-setting judgment delivered by our Constitutional Court in June 1996, in the case of State versus Makwanyane, death penalty was finally abolished in the Republic of South Africa by our Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court ruled that the imposition of the death penalty is incompatible with the right to life as enshrined in the Bill of Rights in our Constitution. Quote, to all other rights in the Constitution. Without life, in the essence of existence, it would not be possible to exercise rights or to be the bearer thereof. But the right to life was included in the Constitution not simply to enshrine the right to existence. It is not life as mere organic matter that the Constitution cherishes, but the right to human life, the right to share in the experience of humanity. This concept of human life is at the center of our constitutional values. Further, expanding on the notion of the right to life, the court also found that this particular right incorporates the right to dignity. So the right to dignity and to life are intertwined. Quote, as a human being with dignity, because without dignity, human life is substantially diminished. Without life, there cannot be dignity, of course. Also found that no experiential study, no statistical exercises, and no theoretical analysis has been able to demonstrate that capital punishment has any deterrent force greater than that of a heavy sentence of imprisonment. The Constitutional Court, in interpreting provisions of the interim constitution, abolished the death penalty and held that capital punishment violated the right not to be subjected to cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment, which is also expressly provided for in our Constitution and Bill of Rights. The majority court concluded that capital punishment constituted cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment on four primary grounds. Firstly, that almost inherent arbitrariness in sentencing is characterized by such punishment. Secondly, that the failure of the sentence to treat the guilty party as a human being worthy of respect diminishes on the validity of such punishment. Thirdly, that the irredeemable nature of the punishment meant that any errors could not be corrected permanently. And fourthly, the cruelty that individually flows from the delays which the convicted individuals face when awaiting execution, and often the nature of the execution itself detracted from a sense of upholding human dignity. South Africa's first democratic president, the late Nelson Mandela, summarized the death penalty well when he said, and I quote, "The death sentence is a barbaric act. It's a reflection of the animal instinct in human beings," end quote. In response to the Constitutional Court decision, our national legislature adopted the Criminal Law Amendment Act, Act number 105 of 1997, which makes provision for the setting aside of sentences of death in accordance with law and their substitution by lawful punishment. Of course, the death penalty having ceased to be such lawful punishment. After the Constitutional Court judgment, political crimes and other crimes had their sentences commuted to life imprisonment. Over the years, due to the crime situation and a belief that capital punishment would deter criminal behavior, there have been calls from some that capital punishment be reinstated. Many legal systems globally, over a period of time, for an eye and quote, brand of justice. As South Africans, we do not want to go back to that principle of retribution because it embraces violence as the core value of society. To us, now living in a democratic society based on respect for human rights, such a doctrine of retribution is unacceptable. To many, the death penalty is regarded as a deterrent to serious crime, but we know from our history in South Africa that despite the liberal use of the death penalty, the apartheid government was unable to deter serious crime. The situation in the 1980s reached crisis point with hundreds on death row, sufficient to compel the then government to suspend all executions at the time. This was in recognition of the failure of capital punishment and in preparation for the dispensation which would entrench the right to life in our Constitution. In terms of international relations, South Africa is party to treaties on extraditions and mutual legal assistance in criminal matters, including Act number 67 of 1962, makes no mention of the death penalty as a ground for refusal of extradition. However, an exclusionary clause occurs in certain of the Republic's bilateral treaties. For example, it is stated that when the offense for which extradition is sought is punishable by death under the laws of the requesting state and is not punishable by death under law in the requested state, the requested state may refuse extradition unless the requesting state provides assurance that the death penalty will not be imposed, or if imposed, will not be carried out. South Africa, therefore, declines to surrender a person to a foreign jurisdiction where the death penalty is a sanctioned form of punishment, and where, in the instance of the requested extradition, there is probability that an order for execution may be imposed as penalty. On 20 September 2006, the government of South Africa signed the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, the OPCAT. One of its main objectives is to establish a system of regular visits undertaken by independent international and national bodies to places where people are allegedly deprived of their liberty in order to prevent torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. In conclusion, once again, South Africa would like to commend the Community of Sant'Egidio, for its relentless activism in advocating for universal abolition of capital punishment and commitment to the defense of human rights. Thanks to the unrelenting efforts of the community, we have indeed come a long way to be today. 30 November 1786, in Tuscany, the first time in history that the death penalty was abolished here in Italy and indeed in the world. South Africa has joined hands with many countries calling for the end of the death penalty. Our democratic government took a conscious decision to entrench the right to life in our constitution, given the problems attached to the death penalty, some of which have been well pronounced by our constitutional court. The rights to life and dignity are the most important of and the source of all other personal rights in a broader scheme of fundamental rights. By committing ourselves to a world without death penalty and which is founded on the recognition of human rights, we are required to value these two rights above all others. And this must be demonstrated by states in everything they do, including the way they punish their offenders. Indeed, the question of death penalty is the right to life must be on the agenda for Africa and the world in general as we grapple with the call to go back to the values of Ubuntu, which are the values of humanity in beloved human race. I thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you, Minister, for your interpretation of this issue and for the clarity with which you illustrated the history of South Africa. Despite the difficulties your country and people have had to face, you mentioned very clearly that the right to life is one of the building blocks of your entire legal system. Thank you very much. Your contribution is very encouraging. Also, vis-a-vis the new problems we have to face. You mentioned crime and other issues which may in fact lead some to have a desire to go back to the death penalty. Therefore, thank you very much for your very clear views, and we truly feel that South Africa is by our side in this battle. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to welcome some of the ambassadors present. The ambassador of Switzerland, Germany, Luxembourg. I'm the representative of the Swiss Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Jonas Pasquier. Switzerland, as you know, is a country which is very much committed to the abolishment of the death penalty, and I want to thank them for the excellent cooperation between the Swiss government and the Community of Sant'Egidio on this topic and others. Thank you very much indeed. We now wish to give the floor to the Cambodian Minister of Justice, Ms. Ang Von Vatana, who is minister since 2014 and who has brought about the reform of the legal system. Cambodia is a de jure abolitionist country, and it too, in its recent history, has had to deal with very complex and painful situations. And despite these, Cambodia was able to fully abolish the death penalty, also based on the constitution, which
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Ministry of Justice, Kingdom of Cambodia, it's my great pleasure to express my deep thanks to the community of Sant'Egidio for always inviting the Cambodian delegation to participate in the important conference, A World Without the Death Penalty. It is the fifth time for the Cambodian delegation to be invited for this conference, which allows our delegation to pursue new information as well as the advancement from one conference to another one. Particularly, we noticed that this year's conference is of justice and representative from different countries. On the other hand, the topic, A World Without the Death Penalty, was already conducted in the Philippines in 2014, which was a plenary discussion for Asia-Pacific countries to focus on human rights and human dignity for the purpose of making a joint statement on the City for Life. For this ninth international meeting, the discussion will focus on two different strategies concerning moratorium and abolition process in various countries. In accordance with the research, I have noticed that the legal provision in some countries in Asia, the death penalty is stipulated in laws in some countries, but among those countries, some countries have the death penalty stipulated in law, but the punishment is not implemented. Some countries are considering to implement the moratorium strategy, and in some other countries, the moratorium strategy is being implemented. Meanwhile, the death penalty in some countries in Asia has already been abolished. Cambodia in 1989, East Timor in 1999, and Philippines in 2006. At the same time, I would like to take this opportunity to share with you about the legal provision and law implementation in Cambodia. As well as we know that the right and obligation of the state is not entitled to deprive any citizen of life. Instead, the state is obliged to protect and respect the life of every citizen. And the application of the death penalty is to deny guilty people's opportunity to change forever. In the Constitution of Cambodia, 1993, Article 32 clearly states that there shall be no capital punishment. And this is the will of the Royal Government of Cambodia to protect all the offense seriously committed by the actor. Based on the spirit of this constitution, there is no article of capital punishment in all domestic law, including the 2009 Criminal Code, in spite of serious crime or international crime such as genocide, crime against humanity, or war crime. According to Cambodia law, it is only life imprisonment for maximum punishment for those who commit serious crimes. Obviously, Cambodia has so far conducted trial on the Khmer Rouge commit crime during the period from 1975, which estimated 2 million people were killed. In this case, based on the law 2004, law on the establishment of the extraordinary chamber in the Court of Cambodia, ECCC law, It provided for only life imprisonment for a maximum of the 1956 criminal code, but they were amended and abolished the capital punishment. For example, in Dutch case, Kangek alias Dutch, who commit the crime during the period of democratic Cambodia in S21. The big organized killing field from 1925 to 1979 was finally convicted to life imprisonment and ground breach of the Geneva Convention of 12 August 1949. Furthermore, the extradition treaty were made between the Kingdom of Cambodia and other countries. And with respect to the applicable extradition treaty, Cambodia has its authority to refuse any special case if the extradition is incompatible with humanitarian perspective because of personal situation of the request after. For example, in case where any person is sent to the requesting state and his or her offense constitute its authority to refuse to send him or her to the request state. Once again, on this useful opportunity on behalf of the Ministry of Justice, Cambodia, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Community of Sant'Egidio and for the initiative in organizing this important conference every year. And I believe that all countries will consider the attention.
Grazie, signor Ministro, per le sue parole.
Thank you, Minister, for your contribution. I'd now like to give the floor to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Sierra Leone, Joseph Fitzgerald Kamara. And Sierra Leone is an abolitionist or a de facto abolitionist country. And Sierra Leone, too, has a recent history of major difficulties linked to the civil war in the 1990s. And yet, in recent years, there has been a major evolution on this topic, so much so that Sierra Leone is in fact one of the countries which voted in favor of the universal moratorium within the UN. You have the floor, Minister.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, participants and observers, I thank you for the opportunity to address this august body this morning. And I also seize the opportunity to thank the organizers for this event. It will interest you to note that having been appointed only 7 weeks ago as Attorney General and Minister of Justice, I am sure you all agree with me that it is with humility that the opportunity is taken to showcase the strides that our very small country, Sierra Leone, has made on the path towards the abolition of the death penalty in particular, and the promotion and protection of human rights in general. Having been formerly a deputy prosecutor of the Special Court for Sierra Leone, the one that was responsible for the egregious trial of all those who committed atrocities against the people of Sierra Leone, and my recent job as head of the Anti-Corruption Commission, I feel very much belong to a territory for the defense of human rights. And I bring you greetings from His Excellency the President, Dr. Anes Bai Koroma, the government and people of Sierra Leone, for your dedication and commitment to the cause of human rights the world all over. Let me also thank the government and people of Italy for the generosity in hosting us. And additionally, I wish to express appreciation for the unique and excellent Italian hospitality that we have received since our arrival in this beautiful and historic city of Rome. I hope to see much of Rome. Mr. Chairman, members of the Community of Sant'Egidio, I'm happy to report that Sierra Leone successfully completed its Universal Periodic Review submission to the Human Rights Council in Geneva a few weeks ago. And the recommendations that were made therein were taken on advisement. Additionally, I was a member of the African Commission on People's Rights in November of 2015, and that was in Banjul, the Gambia. Mr. Chair, by way of context, permit me to draw attention to the more than difficult and troubled recent past of our country, to understand the background from which we come from in attending to the issues of the death penalty. Our country endured an 11-year civil war, during which the most egregious violations of human rights and international humanitarian law occurred. The war ended in 2002, and with the collaboration of the international community, two transitional bodies, we tried persons who bore the greatest responsibility for the violations of human rights, and we also created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Both institutions demonstrated Sierra Leone's resolve to ending impunity at any cost. And in 2004, a report that was published by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission made the abolition of the death penalty one of its key recommendations. It called for the repeal of the laws authorizing the death penalty, a moratorium on all executions, and the commutation of all pending death sentences. As a country, we are pleased to report that in almost 20 years, there has been no execution in Sierra Leone. And since 2012, there are no prisoners on death row. I do recall more recently, a man was sentenced to death in 2013, the first death sentence since 2011, and has been the only person on the death sentence until more recently. In May of 2014, the death sentences of the country's last death row prisoner has been commuted to life imprisonment. In Sierra Leone, crimes punishable by death include murder, robbery with aggravation, and treason. The Criminal Procedure Act, it stipulates that those who are not dead cannot be punished by death. It is also worthy to note that Sierra Leone is a party to the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, and also a signatory to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, a signatory to the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, which all prohibit executions of juvenile offenders. The Criminal Procedure Act further stipulates that if there is reasonable cause for believing that a woman convicted by death and is alleged, in the case of the mentally ill, our law provides that proceedings of the case shall be postponed if the accused or the defendant is of unsound mind and incapable of making his defense. However, if the accused is of sound mind during the preliminary investigation, the court shall proceed with the case, notwithstanding it is alleged that the accused was incapable of knowing the nature of the offense due to the unsoundness of the mind. This is a provision that is under consideration for review by our government. The government continues to implement the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, including furthermore, Sierra Leone, since the end of the war, conducted some 5 democratic local and national government elections, and democracy continued to take firm root in governance. His Excellency the President, since coming to office in 2007, has initiated 2 inclusive and rights-based development programs, the Agenda for Change and the Agenda for Prosperity. Both programs are informed and fully embrace the political, economic, social, and cultural rights guaranteed under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Implementation was moving apace until our small country again was struck by the Ebola virus disease. Double GDP growth and improvement in governance, for instance, even to cite corruption, the perception has worked very well until the strike of Ebola. The unexpected calamity occurred in 3 affected countries of the Mano River Union, that is Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. And it wreaked total havoc on the lives of our people and our economy. National life was brought to a standstill as fear and uncertainty became the norm. There was indeed a clear threat to the national cohesion and security of our nation. And however, as to the extent of enforcement, we enforced a state of emergency that limited strictly necessary movements for the people. And this derogation was subsequently brought to the attention of the Human Rights Council during the midterm review. Nevertheless, Sierra Leone continues to enjoy a high level of political stability, increased space for political participation, expanded opportunities for civil and political rights, empowerment of women, and high levels of political and religious tolerance. Mr. Chair, distinguished delegates, Sierra Leone is undertaking a review of its constitution. The Constitutional Review Committee enjoys the full support of our government, and the government and its partners continue to provide the necessary resources to allow the constitutional review process to complete its work. However, the review process was stalled during the Ebola attack until 2014. Fortunately, it has commenced and resumed its work last year and is scheduled to submit its report this March. And I'm very pleased to report, Mr. Chair, that 2 days ago, before my departure, I received a draft report of the Constitutional Review Committee on my desk. This will provide significant opportunities for the advancement of human rights and to bring Sierra Leone's basic law in line with international human rights standards. That is why the Constitutional Review Committee, amongst the many things it has for consideration, is the issue of abolition of the death penalty, issues of citizenship, libel laws, press freedom, gender discrimination, and equal opportunities. They are all under consideration, and as I speak, on my desk, awaiting action. Let me take the opportunity, Mr. Chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that Sierra Leone continues to give the highest consideration to international human rights standards. And in this regard, Sierra Leone has signed all 9 major international treaties and have ratified 5 that deal with human rights generally. And I take this opportunity once again to thank the Community of Sant'Egidio and thank you all for the opportunity given to us, Sierra Leone, to represent our country. I wish you well. Thank you.
Grazie, thank you very much. Noi speriamo.
Thank you. And we hope that this revision of the Constitution will finally address the question of the abolition of the death penalty by law. And I hope that this conference, dear Minister, will give new momentum to your commitment, giving you also human and legal reasons to take this big step. We are all waiting, we're all expecting from your country, a country that is so important in Africa and, as you said, has gone through a long period of suffering recently. So hopefully this conference will be useful for you and for the commission that is currently reviewing the Constitution. Now we'll hand it over to the next speaker. This is not only a conference of members of government, of ministers, but also a conference of experts on many levels. And I'm very happy to introduce Professor Peter Huber, who's a judge of the Constitutional Court in Germany, elected by the Bundestag in 2010 in Germany. And the mandate, I think the term is 12 years in Germany, so he has a long way to go. And thank you for your contribution to this conference.
Signor Presidente.
Dear President, I'm very happy, I'm very honored to be here today and to give my contribution to your conference. From the viewpoint of a German, a judge that, as you said, has a slightly different approach than what the speakers have had so far.
If you allow me. I wanted to make 4 bigger points. I wanted to show you how Germany has dealt with the death penalty since its origins and how the legal system is at the moment. I will try to give you an explanation why the death penalty is a violation of human dignity. We all speakers in this morning have said it is, but nobody said why is it a violation, and maybe my explanation won't be sufficient, but I'll at least make a try. I will show you some consequences which come out of this classification, and I will have a short word at the end. Well, we've heard just twice this morning that Tuscany, an Italian state, was the first that in the period of Enlightenment abolished the death penalty. The discussion, indeed, also in Germany, already started in the mid of the 18th century. The Constitution of Frankfurt, the Paulskirche of 1849, had a provision in paragraph 139 which wanted to abolish the death penalty at that time too. Unfortunately, this constitution never came into force. Our first democratic constitution after World War I, the Constitution of Weimar, didn't have any rules or prescriptions dealing with the death penalty, although in the National Assembly in Weimar there has been a fierce discussion and the socialists had pleaded for an abolishment, but they didn't find a majority at that time. So it were the experiences of the Nazi regime, the use of the death penalty for even minimum offenses for political adversaries, a trivialization of the death penalty that led the mothers and fathers, the founding fathers of the Federal Republic, to entail into the basic law of 1949 a provision that the right of life is guaranteed under the Constitution for the first time, and as one concretization of this guarantee in Article 2 of our basic law, in Article 102, that the death penalty is abolished. This means that the abolishment of the death penalty in Germany in 1949 is at the end of a very long development, but it also gives us an explanation why there isn't any jurisprudence on this fact, because since the Constitution has come into force, there has never been an opportunity of the FCC to deal with the Federal Constitutional Court to deal with the death penalty. If we look at the European level, Mr. Will has done this already. We see that there are two frameworks that also entail a ban of the death penalty. Although, as a lawyer, you always look at problems that you can find in a text. And if you look a bit closer to these provisions, you might find the one or the other argument why these guarantees aren't as strong as you might think at the first glance. If you look at the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, in Article 2, indeed there is the right of life guaranteed, and in Article 2, Sentence 2, or Paragraph 2, there's an abolishment of the death penalty. The problem is only the European Charter of Fundamental Rights is principally binding only for organs of the European Union, and for the member states only if they apply union law. And union law doesn't have any prescriptions dealing with criminal sanctions, so there's only one bridge dealing with the fundamental values of the European Union, under which the ban of the death penalty in the European Charter of human rights can become of relevance if a member state would reintroduce this, which I don't think is possible and likely. But if this would happen, it might be a breach of fundamental values of the European Union and lead to a procedure under Article 7 of the European Union Treaty, which entails sanctions for the respective member state. If you look at the bigger picture of Europe, the Council of Europe, we see, as has already been mentioned, that there are two protocols to the European Convention on Human Rights, Protocol 6 and 13, that have been ratified by all member states of the European Union, but not of all member states of the Council of Europe. If I've quoted or if I counted it correctly, there are 16 states that haven't done that so far. So it's a bit optimistic, not unrealistic, but a bit over-optimistic perhaps by the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg to say that Europe is a zone without death penalty. It is in reality, but the legal guarantees still have one or two minor problems. Well, my central point and my central message will be, why is the death penalty violation of human dignity? I want to start with what the Cardinal and the Minister of Justice of South Africa has said. It can be taken for granted that death penalty has no deterring effect. This has been proven already in the 19th century, and it is astonishing that mankind needs 200 years until they realize it and they take consequences out of this insight, but better late than never. My guess is at the moment we are at least on the way. I think one thing you have to be aware of is that we've got several understandings of criminal sanctions. If I understood the penitentiary system of the US correctly, criminal sanctions put the culprit out of society. He is something outside the normal society and the normal rules, whereas in Europe our approach is we hold him within society, we try to educate him, to help him to become a better man. Against this perspective, the abolishment of the death penalty is not only a technical measure that could be changed and could be taken from or abolished from the Constitution by an amendment of the Constitution,